Warning: the level of brutality will gradually increase from number 10 to number 1. From horrifying to pure hell on earth. Number 10. The Rad Dungeon. If you lived in medieval London, you've probably heard of the Rad Dungeon, a punishment so terrifying that even the toughest criminals trembled at its mention. It was a deep, dark chamber beneath the Tower of London, where prisoners were chained and left alone in endless darkness. But the darkness and isolation weren't the worst parts. The dungeon was connected to a river tunnel below the waterline. When the tide rose, rats living along the riverbanks were forced to flee their nests, swimming straight into the dungeon. There, dozens of hungry and aggressive rats faced the helpless prisoner. He couldn't see anything, only the faint sound of tiny footsteps growing closer and closer. Within minutes, the scurrying echoed from every direction. Hundreds of rats surrounded him, biting into his flesh piece by piece. The prisoner had no way to defend himself. He might try to fight for a few hours before passing out from exhaustion. But the rats didn't stop. When he woke again, his body was covered with hundreds of bloody bite marks. And the nightmare wasn't over. The prisoner was left there for days, even weeks, depending on how serious his crime was. By the late Middle Ages, this torture had turned into an execution method. Prisoners were simply thrown in and forgotten forever. Number 9. The rack fist device, which looks like a large ladder, was one of the most infamous torture tools in history. It was used to extract confessions from criminals, slaves, and war prisoners. The victim's wrists and ankles were tied to a rolling mechanism at each end. Two officers would slowly turn the handles, tightening the ropes, stretching the victim's joints further with every crank. It was designed to force out the truth, but most victims would say anything just to make it stop. When the torture was finally over, many were left dislocated, paralyzed, or worse. In 1447, a 25-year-old woman named Anne Askew in England was tortured for hours on the rack before being burned alive at the stake, all because she read the Bible and shared it privately with a small group of women. Even under unbearable pain, she refused to betray them. Number 8. Keelhauling. This brutal punishment was reserved for sailors who stole or acted violently at sea. A rope was tied from the sailor's hands, looped under the ship's hull, and back to his feet. He was then thrown overboard, while the crew dragged him beneath the sharp barnacle-covered bottom of the ship. Most victims drowned or broke their necks before reaching the other side. Those who survived faced three fates: being dragged again until death, left to rot on the deck with infected wounds, or living the rest of their lives scarred and humiliated. Number 7. Death by elephant. Hell has opened its gates. Now we enter punishments where survival was nearly impossible. From the 15th to the 19th century in India, you could be crushed by an elephant for something as small as stealing a piece of fruit. The most horrifying event happened when the Mughal emperor ordered hundreds of people to be executed by elephants, simply out of boredom. In the mildest version, the prisoner's hands were tied behind his back, his head placed on a block, and the elephant stomped his skull like crushing a grape. In another version, the victim was laid flat while the elephant trampled over his body repeatedly. Sometimes, the beast was trained to crush each limb slowly, piercing with its tusks before finishing the job. It was a cruel public spectacle that rulers enjoyed and everyone else feared. Number 6. Impalement. Even the name sends chills down your spine. This was one of the most notorious punishments of 15th century Europe, especially favored by Vlad Dracula, the man who inspired the famous vampire legend. Victims were impaled through the body, from the rectum all the way up through the mouth, and the stakes were raised upright in the town square for all to see. Most victims didn't die instantly. They writhed in agony for hours, even days. It's said that Vlad once impaled over 20,000 people at once, just to strike fear into his enemies. Number 5. The breaking wheedle. This multi-purpose medieval device was used to shatter bones and destroy bodies. The victim was tied to a large wooden wheel with limbs spread wide. An executioner then smashed their bones one by one with an iron hammer. The broken body was left hanging high on the wheel for birds and crows to feast upon. Death came slowly, over many unbearable hours. Number 4. The stake. One of the most infamous executions in history, burning at the stake, was reserved for witches and heretics. Victims were tied to a post, surrounded by firewood, and burned alive from the feet upward. People believed the flames would purify their souls, but in truth, they died in agony from suffocation and burns. Number 3. Boiling alive. This horrifying method was used across both Europe and Asia. Criminals were dropped into boiling oil or water, sometimes slowly heated to prolong the pain. Some victims reportedly suffered for nearly 2 hours before dying. Number 2. Quartering by horses. One of the most gruesome executions ever devised. The victim's arms and legs were tied to 4 horses, each pulling in opposite directions. The body was literally torn apart, a gruesome public display meant to warn everyone watching. Number 1. The starvation cage. Perhaps the most inhumane punishment ever recorded. The victim was locked inside an iron cage and hung in a public square, left to die slowly from hunger and thirst. Their body was eventually devoured by birds, leaving only bones behind. The horrifying sight served as a grim reminder of what awaited anyone who dared to defy the law.